Hello YouTube, this is my tutorial on how to make a simple calculator, somewhat like the Apple calculator on most phones. And I've already created the storyboard. I will not be going over it again because of how slow this computer is. But basically, we have a clear button here, our positive and negative button, percentage, all our operations on our side, the equals, all of our numbers, and we have the decimal point. And of course up here we have the result label. So let's start with declaring some variables that will be needed for this project. So we're going to start with a variable known as current number, and this is going to keep track of what our updating result will be. So every single time we click the operation button, this number is going to get updated to whatever it needs to be updated to. Okay, so next we have the operation. Our operation equals 0. Now this will be a variable to keep track of the tag of whatever button was last clicked. So let's say I clicked the multiply button last, it'll take its tag and it'll store it in this variable, and I can use that to update the current number with the operation that I need. Okay, so next we have a counter variable. I'm just going to keep it counter. It's not very specific, but it's basically so the first number is added to whatever's on the screen, because if, let's say I clicked the multiply button, and this current number is 0, I click the multiply button, it'll multiply 0 by whatever's on the screen. Now, anything times 0 will just result in 0, which will just keep leaving it at the number 0 over and over and over. And that'll keep giving us the issue that it's not updating. So that's why on the first number, we're going to keep track with this counter variable so that we know that on the first attempt at clicking operation, it'll add whatever's on the screen to our current number, just so we don't get the error of repetitive 0. Okay, and finally, we will add a operation used variable, which will have type boolean, bool, and this will equal false. So this is basically, let's see, class, okay, there we go. So this variable is basically to keep track of whether the operation was used or not. So if an operation was used, then we'll use it in our number pad function, which will control all the numbers. And it'll basically be so every single time an operation is clicked, the next numbers will replace the string in the result label text. So it won't append, it will actually just completely replace it, because we don't want a continuous long string saying our whole equation. So this will be here just to keep track of that. And now we can insert our result label. It's outlet. I'm going to put it right here. Just going to name that result label. And now we have the result label up there. And now under here, I'm going to make some space, and I'm going to add a function for all the numbers. So I'm going to start with a 0. And I'm going to name this number pad. Now, I did not mention this before, but every number I've put in our number pad has a tag that's 1 above the number in its text. So 0's tag is 1, 1's tag right here you can see is 2, 2's tag is 3, 3's tag is 4, 4's tag is 5, 5's tag is 6, 6's tag is 7, 7's tag is 8, 8's tag is 9, and 9's tag is 10. So you'll see why this is here in just a moment. Now we're going to connect all the numbers to this function, because all the numbers will rely off of this function to print whatever number is needed, whatever corresponding number there is to the button, that will print into our result label. So we're not going to make multiple functions for every single number. We're going to connect them all to one, since they all have the same purpose. And then you need to make sure that you're control clicking and you're dragging, making sure it's connecting the action rather than inserting a new one. Now we will connect this, and now we should have all 9 connected to it. We can see just by putting our cursor over this little icon right here, and it shows what's connected to the function. So we have every number connected. Now let's start by declaring a constant using the let keyword, and we'll name this tag, and it's equal to, so we want it to equal the tag of whatever number is clicked. So we would start by, let's put dot tag. Inside here we're going to put sender. Sender is whatever button is being clicked. Sender as UI button. And this should store the tag of whatever button we click. So let's say we click the number 5. This line will store that the tag of number 5, which is 6. So 6 will be stored in this variable, and we'll use that to print on the screen. Now let's put a little comment here. Stores tag of clicked button. Okay, so our next part will be, let's put some space again. So we need to make an if statement to see if the number is 0. So if the number is on the screen is just a 10, we want to replace that number. Because usually on a calculator, when we open our calculator on our Apple phones, it shows the number 0, which is just the default on when you start up the application. It'll just show a simple number 0. And in that case, we want the 0 to, we want whatever number we click to replace that, because 0 at the beginning of a number does not really have any meaning. So to do that, we're going to start with if result label, and this result label is what is up here. If the result label dot text, we're accessing the text method, and equal to, this equal sign is just to check whether if the text is equal to something. So if it's equal to 0, if it's equal to actually not the integer, we want it in a string form. And we're going to open our curly braces. Result label dot text is equal to string tag -1. Now what this means is that, so if the label is 0, we want whatever number we click to replace it. And this basically says if the result label is 0, like if the text is 0, we want the result label's text to equal the tag, which it's referring to this variable right here. So it'll store what the tag of whatever button we click. And whatever number stored in that tag, we want it to be subtracted by 1, since every tag is 1 greater than the text, if that makes any sense. For example, if I clicked, let's say I clicked the number Let's say we start up our application and I click the number 7. 7 has a tag of 8. 8 will be stored in this variable when I click the number 7, and it checks if the result label is 0. Now once we start up the application, at first it's always going to be 0. So when I click the 7, this line will change the text on the result label to 7. It won't append it, but it will completely change it so that instead of saying 07, it'll just say 7. And then this string right here is just something called typecasting, and this basically switches its data type. So this tag -1, this would equal some kind of integer, but with the string, we find this answer of the tag -1, and we add the string so that whatever value is in here, we convert it to a string so we can add it to text. Because if we were to add an integer to a text, it would give us an error since there are two different data types and they wouldn't really match. Okay, so moving on, we have our else statement to this. Else, meaning that if the result label is not equal to 0, we want it to append to whatever number's on the screen. So instead of saying result label.text equals string tag -1, we want it to say result label.text plus equals string tag -1. Now what the plus equals does, let me just write it out. Result label.text, which is the text of the label, we want it, instead of saying equals string tag -1, which we talked about, this is just the tag -1 turned into a string. And now we don't want it to equal that because that would simply replace whatever number's on the screen. So if I clicked, if I already have a 7 on the screen and I click the number 2, I don't want the 7 to switch to a 2. I want it to say 72. So to do that, we will add the plus, and this will actually append whatever we click to the text up here. Oh, and we're getting an error because we need to force unwrap this. Force unwrapping, since this isn't optional, we need to unwrap it using this exclamation point. So if we run this, we'll be able to write whatever numbers we want onto the screen. Here we have our calculator launched and ready. Not fully, but we'll be testing out our number pad function. So we start by clicking any number. Let's say we click the number 6. The tag of the number 6 is stored, which is 7, and it sees that the result label is 0, so then it replaces the 0 with the string of tag -1. So the tag was 7, tag -1 is 6, and that is converted to a string and is replacing the 0 completely. Now the second time I click a number, let's say I click 5, the 5 appends. So this is happening because it does the same thing. It stores the tag inside this tag variable. It checks if the result label is equal to 0, and it is not. So it jumps to the else statement, and the else statement says if the result label is not equal to 0, we want you to add to it instead of replacing it. So this time it adds to it with using this plus equals function, and it allows us to add to the number however many times we want. So instead of having a 0 at the starting, it'll have an actual value. Thanks for watching, everybody, and part 2 will be coming soon.